A reading from 2 Kings chapter 13, verses 14 through 23. Elisha said to the king of Israel, "Grasp the bow." So the king grasped it, and Elisha put his hands on the king's hands. Elisha said, "Open the east window." So he opened it. Elisha said, "Shoot." So he shot. Then Elisha said, "The Lord's arrow of victory, yes, the arrow of victory over Aram. You are to strike down the Arameans in Aphek until you have put an end to them." Then Elisha said, "Take the arrows." So he took them. Then Elisha said to the king of Israel, "Strike the ground." So he struck the ground 3 times and stopped. The man of God was angry with him and said, "You should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times. Then you would have struck down Aram until you had put an end to them. But now you will strike down Aram only 3 times. Then Elisha died and was buried. Now Moabite raiders used to come into the land in the spring of the year. Once, as the Israelites were burying a man, suddenly they saw a raiding party. So they threw the man into Elisha's tomb. When he touched Elisha's bones, the man revived and stood up. King Hazael of Aram oppressed Israel throughout the reign of Jehoahaz, but the Lord was gracious to them, had compassion on them, and turned towards them because of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He was not willing to destroy them. Even now, he has not banished them from his presence. Word of the Lord.
Just before we get started, one of the fascinating things, like when you get toward the end of that passage and it starts talking about dead people coming to life, one of the funny things is you read, non-Christian commentators on this passage, and they go, how strange that is. That couldn't possibly have happened. But the whole existence of Christianity is basically a tribute to the reality that we truly believe in life after death. We believe in the power of resurrection, and that doesn't shock us at all. The entire movement that we're a part of, the entire thing that we've been doing for thousands of years at this point, is a testimony to the fact that dead people really do come back from the grave. Even the act of baptism itself is a signification of Jesus Christ, death, burial, and resurrection. And so we look to that. That is our hope in life and in death this morning. This morning, we're going to look at an issue, the issue of godly ambition this morning. And I think that this is an important thing to look at for our church and for all of us, no matter where you're at in life, for a number of reasons. And there are 2 that kind of stand out to me this morning as I reflect on conversations I've had with some of you and the things that have come up as we go along. And that is, if you look at this passage and you look at the connection points to where we are today, we live in a time of great uncertainty. And in this passage, we pick up at a time of incredible uncertainty of what on earth is going on. You see in this passage, the light of these incredible prophets of the people of God is growing dim. They're dying out. Elisha's on his deathbed. What's going on next? What's going to come next? And you even see the king of the nation. He's disturbed. He's really concerned about what's going on. In fact, as you look at verse 14, there's kind of this king makes this comment about the death of Elisha, and he's saying the chariots and armies of Israel. What is he saying about it? He's saying this prophet who's dying is even greater than all of my armies put together. And so he's stunned, he's overwhelmed by what's happening, and he looks out in the future with a lot of dread of what's going to happen next. And I think as I talk to many of you, that's the experience of life that you have. You look out at the future with a lot of dread, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions about what's going to come next. Some of you, it's, I'm preparing to leave the house for the first time and journey into adulthood. What does that mean? For some of you, it's looking ahead to college or grad school. For some of you, it's looking ahead to a new career, a new job. Some of you, it's looking ahead or just having the little ones who've entered into your home and the great unknowns that brings with it. The one that has me freaked out more than anything is kids on the precipice of the teenage years. Man, nothing has me more frightened than that. And others of you, it's looking to job change, to empty nest, to retirement. We all have different things. We all have different stages of life that we're at and things that are unknown ahead of us. But that is a great unifying factor of all of us. We all have things that we're looking toward and saying, I don't know how this is going to pan out. In fact, I'm frankly a little nervous and a little afraid of what the future holds in these areas. In addition, I would say even the most optimistic people I talk to look at the changes that are happening in the world around us, in the culture, the rise of kind of technological changes and AI and the profound effect that social media has had on the current and previous generations. And they look at that with a lot of alarm, a lot of concern, to the point that it's very easy to look at my kids and their generation and the world that they're going to grow up in and the grandkids down the line and say, what is this world becoming? What kind of world are they going to grow up in? There are a lot of uncertainties with that, a lot of fear, a lot of trepidation. So we connect with the passage on that level. But I think we also connect with it on a practical level in terms of like, how do I practice ambition in my life? How do I chase after the things that I'm supposed to in this life? Because I think we recognize there are two real ditches when it comes to ambition and how people carry themselves when it comes to the future and when it comes to opportunities that are in front of them. There are some people who are the climbers, and they're the people who are always looking around the corner. They're always looking for ways to kind of position themselves to encounter what comes next. They're trying to promote themselves, posture, pursue success at every turn. And sometimes that takes a really dark manifestation. It manifests itself in ways that sometimes to climb and to get to the top, you end up stabbing people in the back to get ahead. And you see people who operate in that way. But then on the other hand, you have the squatters. These are those who wait for the opportunities to pick them up and take them by the hand and take them where they can find success in life. And some people do this because they're the prima donnas. They've had everything handed to them, and they just think, well, that's just how life should work. I should be handed everything on a silver platter because I'm awesome. Everyone is awesome, in fact. Some people are squatters because in the category of the book of Proverbs, they're just lazy. They can't motivate, and they are not drawn toward the things of the Lord, and they just can't pursue what is right, even if it's staring them right in the face. And then there are some who are there in that situation just because they're discouraged. They've been kicked in the teeth one too many times, and they just find themselves in that ditch and saying, I just can't. I just can't with getting back up and doing the thing again and again and again. And I think that as people look at those two ditches, not just Christians, but I think everybody can look at those ditches and say, like, I don't know that I really want to be in either one of those. Like, I can see the ditch of the climbers and say, like, I don't want to really live that life of pride and obsession that motivates so many of the climbers that I see in my life. On the other hand, I look over at the squatters and say, like, I don't want to be drawn into the trap of laziness or entitlement or depression. And so I don't want that either. So what's a better way? And I think the Bible holds out, even in a passage like this, there is a better way to pursue ambition with our lives. There is a higher path. There is a different road that we can take, and that is the path of godly ambition. We're going to look at this morning just 4 principles of godly ambition that are drawn out from this passage, and then we're going to look at the power that really drives this ambition in the life of a Christian. So first of all, the 4 principles of godly ambition. In this passage, you're going to see these kind of come out both in the positive examples of this story, and you're also going to see some negative examples in this story. And between those two, we could draw out these principles of what this looks like through the life of King Jehoash and his encounter with Elisha. I do think this passage actually is a really kind of an interesting story in the Bible in the sense that if you're paying attention and you want to do some extracurricular reading today, zoom back about 3 verses and you look at verses 10, 11, 12, 13, 4 verses. If you look at those, you're going to see this basically a summary of Jehoash's life. It's going to already give you, here's a guy who lived and died, and everything he did was as the refrain goes, evil in the sight of the Lord. So we've already seen him live, died, put in the ground, buried, and now all of a sudden it's, backing up the clock. It's the cut that kind of goes back in time. All of a sudden, we're getting the prequels here, and it's zooming back to before. And so you get this kind of like, why are we working out of sync with time? Why are we doing the George Lucas thing here? And it's the reality that there is this critical and pivotal moment in this guy's life that really set him up to be this guy who was going to be evil in the sight of the Lord. And so this passage is kind of zooming in and drawing our focus in and saying, what is it that led this guy to this place? What was this moment in his life? This watershed moment where it could have tipped this way or it could have tipped that way. And it tipped the wrong way. Here it is, right here in 4K for us this morning. So the 4 principles of godly ambition. Number 1, godly ambition translates tears into tenacity. Verse 14, it says, when Elisha became sick with the illness from which he died, King Jehoash of Israel went down and wept over him and said, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel. At first glance, you read a verse like 14 like this and say, boy, this seems really jarringly unlike what we would think of a guy who did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. I mean, here's a guy who's weeping over a dying prophet of God. Surely this is a good guy. Surely this is somebody who's really motivated by the right things and pursuing the Lord. And we look at that and say, how can this be? But this really actually gives us insight, immense insight, in how someone can shift from a posture that seems very genuine and moved and go down in defeat. To make it practical, I would say those of you who've been around the church for some time of your life, have there not been those times where you get together for a worship service, maybe similar to this, and you're singing songs, and there are just emotions that are washing over you, and there are feelings that you're having as you process? I remember even talking to one guy who deconstructed from Christianity, left that far behind. He said, but I love to go to worship services and hear the music, because there's something in there. There's something meaningful and deep and rich. And there is a way to emotionally encounter Christianity. There is a way to emotionally encounter God that's not a real and true experience of God. There is a way to be under the preaching, under the encouragement of the community of the saints, and to be deeply and richly moved by things that never end up transforming your life, that never end up translating to a life change before God. And so this verse kind of gives us this insight into it from this king's standpoint, who's deeply moved at the loss of Elisha. I think this is really one of the great risks of 2 things. Number 1, a media-saturated Christianity that we find ourselves in. I think some of the first opportunities I had to watch the series The Chosen. It's a fascinating series. I commend it. It does a lot of good stuff. But one of the things that I realized through this, and even just talking with people who were processing it, is they said, I walked away and I was just really moved by what I was encountering on the screen and the portrayal of Jesus. It was raw, it was authentic, it was gritty, and there was so much good in that. But I wonder, is there not a placebo effect where we end up walking away from feeling certain feelings about Jesus without crossing over the line of faith and trusting in Jesus? I believe that's one of the real dangers in the world that we find ourselves in, where we're saturated with all of these portrayals, where we get these manufactured experiences with God, but never yet have an experience with God himself. It's one of the great challenges of a sort of kind of therapeutic version of Christianity that I see a lot these days, where we prize kind of feeling a particular way about God, feeling a particular way about the church even. But those feelings can often come apart from thinking the right way about God, from acting the right way toward God. It becomes nothing more than a moralistic, therapeutic deism, not true Christianity, not the true gospel, but a feelings-oriented activity. This morning, I want you to be thinking this morning, if the Spirit of the Lord works in my life, if I am prompted to do something different, if those emotions start to wash over me, I'm not just going to let it remain there, but I'm going to obey. When the Spirit of the Lord is working, I will obey. I will act. It's one of the things that really shook me about Josiah's testimony when he pulled me aside. Is he said, God had been working and stirring in my heart about needing to be baptized and to take that step personally. And God had been doing that work, and he said, I just made this commitment to God while I was driving to church, that if it was clear something in the line of baptism, that's what I would go and do. I would grab one of the pastors and say, I need to be baptized. And guess what? That morning, we baptized Brent and Christina and Delilah. And so he comes up to me afterwards and says, yes, I want to carry through with this. This is the translation of the feelings into actions. This is what the king was never able to really do, to take up with tenacity the ambition to follow God. Number 2, godly ambition takes today's opportunities. In verse 15, the story goes on. It says Elisha responded, get a bow and arrows. So he got the bow and arrows. There seems to be even a willingness to kind of follow through on what this old prophet is doing. It'd be really easy for the king in this situation to look at this old feeble prophet on his deathbed and just kind of there. He's lost his marbles a little bit in his old age. Bow and arrows. Like what are we doing here? But instead he seizes the opportunity. He goes ahead and he follows through with the words of the prophet, and does something that is going to be symbolic of a critical opportunity that king and that nation needed for victory, for protection, for the safety of their people. And so he does, to some extent, seize the opportunity that's in front of you. I put up there a verse. It comes from the book of Ephesians that the Apostle Paul wrote. Ephesians 5:16 says, making the most of the time because the days are evil. I think this is a really important connection to a passage like this, in that when the Apostle Paul writes that verse and he says, making the most of the time, he uses a very special word for time there. So the Greeks had a typical word that they would use for time. It was the word chronos, which is where we get the word chronology. But Paul uses a very special word. He uses the word kairos, which designates a specific moment in time. Kind of a precipice, if you will, a critical opportunity, a special moment in time, a tipping point. And what I believe Paul is getting at is there are those critical moments in life where a particular decision has eternal ramifications, has immense generational differences at stake of what we do or what we don't in that moment. And the Apostle Paul is holding out this reality. Take every one of those up. Join in the mission of God. Experience God's work to restore fallen worshipers back to himself. But he acknowledges that there is another item in play here. He says, making the most of the time. Why? Because the days are evil. There is a second principle at play, and that principle is a principle of evil. There is an evil one who is active in this world trying to snatch up and take away those critical moments, to shift things in a negative direction. This is not neutral. There are battle lines drawn, whether we like to admit it or not, whether we want to see it or not. There are real lines that we are dealing with. There is one who is trying to snatch up and destroy opportunities for your life and for the life of the family around you, for the life of your friends. So don't keep going on the hunt when God has the opportunity sitting right there in your path. Your everyday decisions possess eternal dimensions. Seize the day. Number 3, trust God's promises. Verse 17, the prophet goes on to explain, hey, this thing I'm telling you to do, is enacting God's promises on your behalf. This is a sign of what God is going to do to bring victory to your nation, to bring safety to your people. So take this action and trust in the promises of God. God is promising to act if Jehoash will act. So essentially, ambition puts action to the assurances of God. We put our feet to the task. This reminds me so many times that we have these promises from God. We have promises of spiritual growth. Philippians 1:6 says, "He who started a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Jesus Christ." We are promised that those of us who have trusted in Jesus, those of us who've crossed the line of faith and have been transformed by the work of the Holy Spirit, things are changing, things are moving. That work will not stop. It will keep going on and on and on into the future. There are generational, lifelong, and eternal dimensions to the fact that those who cross the line of faith, who trust in Jesus Christ for themselves, will experience ongoing transformation in this life. But there's a call, though, to keep on following. We don't just claim a promise and never act on it. It's similar to Matthew 6:33. We have a promise that we will have all the things that we need. Jesus says, "But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be provided for you." You're saying, don't worry about your needs. God's got this. God's going to take care of you. Oh, but there's action to it, right? But seek first the kingdom of God. Put him first, prioritize him in your life, follow after him, and you won't have to worry about your daily needs. You won't have to worry about having enough to eat. God's got this. There is action paired with promise. There's action paired with promise when it comes to our battle with temptation. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, "No temptation has come upon you except what is common to humanity. But God is faithful. He will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation, he will also provide a way out so that you may be able to bear it." There's a promise of a way out. There's promise of freedom from the things that come against us. The door's open. But the question is not so much often that there is a door open and a way out of temptation, as much as, am I going to take it? Am I going to take the exit door that's right in front of me? Or do I want to stay in it? These are examples of promises of God that come with a call to obedience, a call to action, to do something with it. They're available for those who take the step of faith. Godly ambition pursues and secures the promises of God by action. God's promises, I think for most of us, there are so many promises of God, good things that God holds out for us, that we almost treat like the unclaimed Powerball ticket. It's out there. There are great riches available for us from God to live the kind of life that we always wanted to be able to live, to overcome the things that we always struggle with and feel haunt us, the demons that we look back at and say, I'll never be able to improve. I'll never be able to have success in this area. The worries that we have about whether or not we're going to make it. The struggles that we have in our lives with sin. And we look at those things and we just believe that it'll just always be that way. But what if there's a promise of something better, simply calling on us to cash the check? Reach out and take hold of the promises of God this morning. Number 4, godly ambition targets more than the bare minimum. Verses 18 and 19, see this example of where after he knows what the promises of God are, he knows that he's doing this act that's kind of symbolic of the nation's victory, his people's security and safety. Then he's told, okay, go shoot some more arrows. And he's handed a stack of arrows, and he shoots 3 of them and calls it quits. And it becomes symbolic, and it becomes really, as the leader, He exemplifies the spirit of the people in that moment. He exemplifies the spirit that he has toward God. He acts only in a limited way. 3 arrows when more were available. He settles for second best. He stops short. He starts questioning the whole situation. Maybe he thinks, this is beneath me. Why am I doing this? Maybe he has lost his marbles. Maybe he is crazy. Like, what's going on here? And so he just shoots the 3 arrows and he's done. And I think this so exemplifies how easy it is to settle rather than to secure God's best, to chase after what God is calling us to in this life. Church, we want to be a church that seeks to be ambitious disciples. We don't want to just see people come to faith. We don't just want to see a bunch of people raise their hands, walk an aisle, make a profession. We want to see people who go on. We want to see people who are ambitious to follow after Jesus, to follow him in baptism, to follow him for all their life, to see kids raised up by godly parents who are trying to seek to raise them up to follow Jesus, to, yes, make that profession, to pray that prayer, to trust in Jesus, but then to walk with him for the rest of their lives. And that's to be commended and held up. We seek to be an ambitious community. We don't want to stop short just seeing people follow Jesus and never become united with the people of God. There are far too many opportunities for people to say, I follow Jesus, but when it comes to following the rest of the New Testament and the way that we're called into community, that's just not for me. We want to be ambitious in that regard. We want to lean in to the difficulty and the beauty of community. We seek to be ambitious for holiness. I think there's a lot of opportunities where when people come to faith and they begin working through stuff, it's easy to say, hey, I'm going to really focus in on the big sins in life. I often have conversations with guys where there's some big looming sin. And one of the best things that we do is I just say, hey, let's not talk about that for a month. Let's talk about all the other stuff that you got going on. And as we start doing that, and we start unpacking other areas of pride, anger, lust, failing to lead out in the home, you start prying back those layers. You suddenly start seeing there's all these things that have been unaddressed and been lying there for years, never being handled because of the looming big sin that I was just trying to handle, just trying to focus in on. Just focusing on the big sins is not enough. In fact, it can be somewhat distracting when we zero in on focus on holiness for all of life. That's what we want to pursue. We want ambition in that direction. We want to seek ambitious families. We don't stop short I see far too many dads are content saying, hey, I'm not abusive like my dad was. I'm not neglectful like my dad was. I'm at least here. I show up. Stop contenting yourself with just showing up. Be ambitious to make an impact on your family. Be ambitious to make an impact for the next generation, to bring the light of heaven into your home. That ought to be our ambition, to see that generational impact for Christ. We need to stop selling ourselves short. We need to stop settling for the successes of the moment. I think even as a call here to our church, here at Christ Fellowship Eastside, let's not be a church that settles for second best. It'd be very easy for us to settle and say, man, we've grown a lot over the past year. Isn't that incredible? Boy, now we can kind of sit back and take it easy, just soak in it. It'd be really easy to settle and say, we've baptized 10 people this year. Wasn't that a great 2025? And to mark that on the scorecard and say, we've made it, we're done. We've accomplished something wonderful. We've seen great fruit of lives changed and people following Jesus. Let's just bask in the glow of that for a little bit. It'd be easy to settle for just saying, hey, let's fill all the pews in this building. Wouldn't that be great? Now, that's far too little. We're not really shooting for what God is calling us to. Church, what we are about, and over the years I've had many people ask me, what is the vision of Christ Fellowship Eastside? What are y'all all about? And some people are looking for some detailed master plan. Some are looking for a cute cliche. Others are looking for numbers, number of professions of faith, or maybe some big building project. I want to lay it out for you this morning. It's simply this: multiply disciples to the glory of God. Multiply disciples to the glory of God. We say it, and we say it, and we say it, because that is our vision. We say multiply, not sustain. There are a lot of churches in Greenville who sustain disciples to the glory of God, and they're doing good work. God bless them. But that is not our vision. Our vision is not to add disciples to the glory of God. +1, +2. Our vision is to multiply disciples to the glory of God. Exponential, generational impact that will change forever the shape of the Eastside community of Greenville. To see lives transformed, people walking with Jesus, people living an entirely different sort of way. In other words, what we're doing is simply looking around and saying, 10 baptisms, that's great. Let's celebrate with the Beards. Let's celebrate with Josiah. But Lord, we want more. We want to see you do more. We want to see you do greater things than what we have seen to this date. We look across Greenville and we celebrate with Rodney. We have these 4 small groups that are meeting up and are wrestling through difficult things of life together. How to walk and follow Jesus on a daily basis, sharing their deep struggles, being a place of healing. And we look at that and we say, God, we thank you for that. But we want more. We want to see it multiply to the ends of the earth. We look at the 30 kids that are gathered and hearing the gospel this morning over in the other wing. And we are so grateful for that they are hearing the word of God clearly, that they are being called to trust in Jesus Christ for salvation. But we look at that and we say, we want more. We want to see the whole next generation reached for Jesus. We want to see lives transformed from the youngest all the way up to the oldest. We want more. We're begging God for more. Raise up more. Look at the leaders, the elders who are being raised up in this church, the small group hosts and leaders and deacons and other ministry leaders. And we say, thank you. God, you have sent us so many great and gifted people, but Lord, we want more. Multiply it like you did the fish and the loaves. Take our small talents, our small group of people, and multiply it. Not for our glory, but for yours. I want you to hear stories like the fact, I was looking at social media. There is a church today that is celebrating its 20th anniversary. In 2005, a little church plant called Cross Point Clemson was planted. And 4 years later, in 2009, that church planted a little church that became Christ Fellowship Cherrydale. And after several church plants later, in 2020, that church planted Christ Fellowship Eastside. In 20 years, from nothing to 4 daughter church plants, to 3 granddaughter church plants, to even a great-granddaughter church plant in Halifax, to missionaries scattered to the ends of this earth, to young men and women who are walking with Jesus and proclaiming him in their workplaces and in their homes. 20 years and generational impact for Jesus. That's what can happen when we believe God for more than the bare minimum. When we hold up the belief that God will do more with us, we will not be satisfied to sit still until the glory of the Lord covers the earth as the waters cover the sea, the prophet says. That's the vision. That's what we're about. Many churches even this morning, we gather across Greenville longingly, looking backwards to the days when things were great, to the glory days in the past. Oh, I remember those early 2000s. Oh, I remember the 90s when things were great around here, when God was moving. Let's not be a church that looks back on 2025 and say, man, wasn't that the great year? Wasn't that the highlight year for Christ Fellowship Eastside? May this just be the start. May this just be the beginning. Godly ambition calls us to look to the future, long for God to fulfill his promises in and through us. Here at Christ Fellowship Eastside, let's not be the church that throws away our shot. Let's not be the church that just shoots first and stops there. Let's be the church that keeps shooting out arrows into the world for Jesus, because we believe fully in the promises and provision of our providential God. As I process these realities, and I think even just as I was thinking through this passage this morning, I realized the call, and I realized the pressure that puts on me to perform, to do things, to really, man, I see far more of Jehoash in myself than I would like to see. That far too often I do settle for the bare minimum. I do fail to seize opportunities that are staring me right in the face. And I go, man, I'm just not knocking it out of the park like that. And I feel that weight on me. But that's why I think it's really important to turn our eyes to the power that lies behind all of this. Because if we're not careful, we can get ourselves stuck in the trap of realizing, man, I'm not that ambitious. I'm not that driven. And it's, if it's all on me and my shoulders, this is all a miserable failure. I get tired. I get worried. I get suspicious. I get busy. I begin to start wondering if my time is best spent on other things. And as a result, I have experienced my ambition for Jesus wane. How many of you would look back at a time in your life, we talk about looking back, and say, I look back at a time in my life where I had that ambition for God. There's a time in my life where that ambition for God burned hot. It's not there anymore. I think that's a reality for many, many people. Many who get worn out, because really, we struggle to move beyond just emotional responses to God. We struggle to pounce on those opportunities God puts in our path. We struggle to really believe that God's going to come through this time after it feels like I've fallen on my face time after time after time. We struggle to believe that we should really exercise ourselves to do more than just the bare minimum. And that's why the epilogue of this story really brings it all into focus. In verses 20 and 21, you get this little story of this man who gets resuscitated from the dead. It says Elijah was dead and buried in the Moabite raiders who used to come into the land in the spring of the year. And once, as the Israelites were burying a man, suddenly they saw a raiding party, so they threw the man into Elisha's tomb. And when he touched Elisha's bones, the man revived and stood up. The power of this little anecdote is this reminder that when you think everything is all dead and gone, when you think that those who had the ambition to follow God, when you think even your own ambitions for God have burned out and are done and are in the grave, look out, because God is still at work. It doesn't rely on you and me. God's work still goes on past and beyond the grave. God is working even beyond our lives. God has not finished with his people. Verses 22 and 23 is this little reminder that God, out of his great love for his people, is restraining the darkness, restraining the evil, holding back what should rightfully fall on them, those who do not follow Jesus. Church, this morning, we cling to the reality that God's plans will not be thwarted by our exhaustion, our distraction, or even our sin. These are realities that the people of Israel experienced. They got off the wrong track. They failed to pursue God fully. We cling to a hope that extends beyond the grave. We cling to a hope of the one whose commitment to us will far outlast our commitment to him. That's what we hold to this morning. And when you look at yourself and reflect and ponder, turn things over, and you see in yourself the feeble acts of Jehoash this morning, I want you to be reminded that there is one who did not cave. There is one who did not stop short. Look beyond Jehoash and look to Jesus, who did in our place everything that was necessary to fulfill the will of the Father. Look to the one who set his face like flint to do the will of the Father, to go to his death. Look to the one who, I love this after the story of this woman at the well, the well-known story of that special moment Jesus has where he calls this woman to receive something that she doesn't have, that he alone can provide to her. And when his disciples came up to him and say, "Hey, Jesus, are you hungry?" He said, "No, I'm good. I am feasting on the will of the Father to be here and provide this woman what she needs. That's my delight. That satisfies everything I need, is to just do God's will." It's not simply that he does that, but he does that in our place. He's the one that didn't stop short. He goes all the way to Jerusalem. And he didn't just stop there. He goes to the garden. He goes before Pilate. And ultimately goes to the cross, goes to the grave, goes to the realm of the dead, and ascends back to the realm of the living and into heaven, taking with him the keys of death and hell in his hands, claiming the victory on our behalf. He did not stop short. He plunged all 6 arrows into the chest of Satan, sin, hell, and death, and came out the victor on our behalf. That's what we cling to. That's our hope. Not that we are ambitious enough to get his smile on us, but that he was ambitious enough to pursue the will of the Father on our behalf. And that's what we trust this morning. That's what we cling to as we come to the table even today. Look, if you this morning say, I just do this tradition of coming and celebrating communion because that's what my family did. That's what, good Christians are supposed to do. Or because, I live a pretty good life, and so this is a good way for me to symbolize that. You've missed the point. The point is that there was one who had ambition to come for you before you ever had an ambition or even an inkling of pursuing him. He's the one that before the foundations of the earth, before we even thought to love him, he loved us. And for that reason, we do love him. It's for this reason, Jesus sacrificing himself, his ambition to pursue us, that we ever have ambition to pursue after him. We don't have to manufacture it this morning, because everything that has been needed, everything that God looks to from you has been provided by him. That is what we plead when we come to this table. His righteousness, not my own. His ambition, not mine. Even in times of great insecurity, uncertainty, doubt, fear, worry about the unknown, looking out into the void of what's coming next, he's there, and he's running toward you in mercy and kindness. This is your reminder. So take some time, ponder, reflect. When you're ready, come down the side.